but welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is our KM in the AM webinar series focusing on wellness and connection. We are extremely privileged to have the Mayor of the Town of Aurora, Tom Mrakas, as our guest today. And in speaking with Tom, he kind of let me know the format's going to be perhaps a little more unique for folks that have attended this before. So I hope all of you on the line have questions and are looking for some specific information in relation to your context. This session is going to be recorded and we will put it on our website. So it will give folks anytime access. If there are any issues or questions with that, feel free to reach out to us later on in the week. I am going to keep everybody muted until it's time to open things up for questions. And we'll use the chat function, please, to create a bit of a speakers list. In some cases, in our early days, it was often the loudest and most aggressive person that got all the floor time. So we'll create a bit of decorum around this. We're also going to end right at the top of the hour. Tom has a council meeting tonight. I'm sure our schedules are also packed. But with that, I will pass things over to Tom with our thanks. Appreciate you being able to join us.
Well, thank you, Michael, for that. And good afternoon, everyone. I did ask Michael when he asked me if I would join everyone, and I thought this was a great opportunity to come out and speak to everyone. I did know that normally everyone kind of comes out and gives like about a 20 to 30 minute kind of speech, but I don't tend to fall into that category. I prefer to have a more engaged type of style and prefer more question and answer period. So, but I do have some opening remarks, and so I will get to that, and then we can have a discussion and hear all your questions and thoughts, and I'll do my best to answer any of those questions as we go through the hour. So, first of all and foremost, I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of the Town of Aurora and Aurora Town Council to discuss decision and policy making during COVID-19 pandemic. Well, first off, I'd also like to thank Knowledge Mobilization Unit at Innovation York for offering me the chance to participate and speak with you all today. As we all know, the COVID-19 crisis has changed the way we all work, live, and play. And on Wednesday, March 18, the Town of Aurora declared a state of emergency in response to COVID-19 outbreak in Ontario. Now, this declaration followed the Ontario government's announcement of a province-wide state of emergency. As a town, we have been working closely with York Region Public Health and provincial and national health agencies to monitor the COVID-19 crisis. And our top priority is the health and safety of our residents, community, and staff. And in regards to policy creation, town staff usually completes months of research with consultations from different working groups and consultants, depending on the complexity of the policy. Now, complex policies can take 6 months to a year to create and approve. Policies are approved at the staff executive leadership team level, and policies that are public facing can also be sent to council for approval where appropriate. Now, decision making during COVID-19 has been a bit different. To make operations smoother during the COVID crisis, Aurora implemented the following emergency policies. A procedural bylaw amendment, which allows Aurora Town Council to meet electronically and continue town's business through the pandemic. We also developed procedures to allow members of the public to delegate in electronic meetings to maintain public participation levels. Procedures created to allow development applications to be continued to be submitted was also created, and the town also formed a pandemic recovery working group that consists of staff from different departments. Now, this group assesses all the aspects that relate to reopening town facilities and ensuring success. And recently, this working group created a pandemic recovery plan to ensure a safe return to work for town staff, as well as regulations for residents visiting our facilities. Now, the regular policy development process definitely takes time to ensure the policy will be effective and serve the needs of staff in the community. But during COVID, related or impacted policies have been reviewed and adjusted at a quicker pace to reflect precautions that are required to keep services and programs operational during this pandemic. And as a consequence of dealing with this pandemic, we will probably expect to see future changes to our current policies in areas of remote working, health and safety, and administrative processes. This is a brief introduction into what municipal policy development looks like right now during this pandemic, especially in the town of Aurora. I look forward to continuing this discussion with all of you today and delivering more into the complexities of policy making and the opportunities and challenges we may face ahead. So thank you. That's my opening. Michael's, as I said, you can tell it's a little bit more structured, a little bit more in my opening, but you know, there's so many things that we've done, and I'll just kind of maybe throw this out there before if there are any questions at this point. We've done a few other things. Is immediately we created a couple of task force that would look at policies that we create to help out our businesses, to help out the most vulnerable in our community. We created the Business Continuity Task Force. We created the Aurora Cares Action Team. We also looked at our arts and culture sector. And so we felt that there was an immediate need to take quick proactive action to instill any policies that are needed as we move forward through this pandemic, because things are coming at you very quickly, and decisions need to be made almost on an hour-by-hour basis. And so there's no time to sit back and have full-out debates. As much as we prefer to do that, decisions need to be made quickly. And so those are some of the things just off the top of my head that we created. But if there are any questions, I'd love to hear at this point.
I'm going to, we got a pretty nimble group too, so this could be a really dynamic conversation, but I'll start, Tom. And I mean, in the world I live in, as a knowledge broker and working with research and researchers, there has been a real growth around the evidence-informed policymaking, where, I think one of the assumptions around that is that that is going to be a significant and primary driver around policy formulation. But I'm wondering if you could let me know from your experience, what are some of the other drivers that go into formulating public policy? I mean, I know evidence is only one component. There must be other variables or drivers that go into policy formulation.
Well, I mean, especially at the local level, and I just to remind everyone, we're speaking, you know, I can only speak specifically to the local level. At a regional level, there's I think a lot of other different drivers at the regional level, and especially at the provincial level as well. But at the local level, personally, it's what I think for the most part, it's community driven. It really is. It really is community driven. I mean, everyone within the community comes out and they reach out directly. You're in touch with your elected officials, and so we're probably one of the only levels of government where we're directly involved with the day-to-day goings of our town and what's happening from the municipal level. So it is I would say for the most part, it's community driven. That's the biggest one. As much as we do look at the other aspects of it, like it's from not being driven from knowledge and going from that aspect, but it's what the community wants is what drives the policy making at a local level. And like I said, that changes at the provincial level, and you'll see more different ways of what drives that that policy. But at a local level, it's definitely community driven.
Thank you very much. Absent a speaker's list now, I'll follow up with that. So the local context is different than something at a municipal and clearly a provincial level. And our work, we work with a lot of human service providers, not-for-profit agencies and such, and a number of them are rooted in Aurora, for example. Would their processes of engagement be attending council meetings and be able to, you know, as appropriate, provide the opportunity to speak or a deposition or some sort of input, be it around a specific policy angle or advocacy work?
Absolutely. So from that perspective, at the local level, especially Town of Aurora, we welcome anyone to come in and have a delegation and speak to, you know, issues or any policy type related issues that they would like to discuss with us. There's also, I mean, email, simple as sending an email to the mayor or to the councilors or even to some of the staff members, our CAO. And that's the way we would start that process. We would work from there. If we don't hear anything, and that's why I'll go back to the fact that it's community driven. If we don't hear things happening from the community, we don't necessarily make changes. We won't look at making changes to our policy because things seem to be moving forward in a very positive manner. And so we will just look at more from our day-to-day issues as far as from the infrastructure, you know, your garbage, your snow removal, all that type of stuff to make sure that we're being also fiscally responsible. And so we would look at all those aspects. But from the policy perspective, people would come out, delegate, speak to us, and then that's what would drive us into looking at and digging deeper into those and saying we might need to change our policy. And I can give some examples, you know, simple as a bylaw. You know, if there's an issue with the bylaw, and we would know when someone comes in, they come in, they'll delegate to the Town of Aurora, delegate to council, and we hear that with what the issues are, and then from there we look at it and we'll see that the policy is a bit outdated or the bylaw is a bit outdated, and we say, you know what, this is an opportunity for us now to start to look at that policy or that bylaw and maybe update it to current standards. You know, things do change over time, and so the other part is we also do realize that fact that things change over time, and so sometimes we will take a look at, and we started to do this in the Town of Aurora right now, is that policies that are pretty outdated, we've instructed staff to start pulling the ones that haven't maybe been had any minor adjustments to them or any updating to them at all for a period of 10 years or more, and start to bring them forward. And so we can start to look at them and see what we can do that would maybe, if there's anything that maybe they don't relate to certain times now, and maybe we need to make those minor adjustments. And so we've started to do that in the Town of Aurora, but it always helps for anyone that they would come out to council and speak to us, and so they can get engaged, and so we know what's going on and what needs to be changed from a policy perspective.
Thank you very much. I've got a question from one of our participants that I'll read out, Tom.
Sure.
In your experience, what are the most effective ways for communities or researchers to drive policy change?
I'll be honest with you, it's one word: engagement. It's getting engaged, coming out, speaking to, especially to the elected officials. And that's, I'm going to go back to, and I don't want to keep going back to the same, but the community-driven aspect of it. If we don't hear of any issues, as I said, we'll think everything is fine from that perspective. And so I always tell everyone the most important thing is, especially at a local level, is when the councillors and the mayor get flooded with emails or get flooded with questions. That's when you can have change, and they realize that there's something going on and something is needed to be done about it, because they see that the whole community thinks that something needs to be done. So the most important thing is to always get engaged with council and with the mayor. It's probably the most important thing to drive policy change in a community.
To the detail around engagement, I mean, you mentioned email. There's certainly council meetings. Would councillors within their schedule, would there be opportunities for residents or community groups to be able to meet and discuss items, or is it generally a little less face-to-face?
I would say, especially, I mean, it depends on which municipality, and I think that's also so. Like the Town of Aurora is slightly different from Vaughan or from Markham. I always say to everyone, try to get a hold of Mayor Scarpitti or Mayor Bevilacqua. You're going to have a more difficult time compared to getting a hold of me, right? And so it's, I mean, we all take a different approach to it, and it also depends on which community you're in. So I'll give you an example from what we do. I've just started 2 weeks ago. I just started virtual coffees with the mayor, and I've sent it out to the whole town. And so residents, anyone in the town can email me, and we'll try to set up either in a group setting or in an individual one-on-one basis. And we try to plug it in my schedule when I have time, and I'll sit down with them, because I always believe that it's important to hear the issues from all our residents. And so that way it'll help, impact on those any policy changes that we need to make as we move forward, because I have a pulse on the community then. And I think that's always important when you're looking at changing policy within a community. If it's not going to bring a positive change or a positive impact to the community, then you really shouldn't be making a policy change. But to me, the most important thing is that engagement piece. But that's one example of a way to for the residents to engage. Councilors would do the same. They're a little bit more out there. Obviously, they don't have as busy a schedule as the mayors do, but at the same time, they are busy. In the town of Aurora, they're a part-time position, so they have their own full-time jobs, but they still answer their emails. But that's also the difference, and I'm going to get into a little bit as far as from a structure, from a governance structure. That's the difference between awards and an at-large. And I know, Michael, I briefly brought this up to you before we started. We're moving to, in the next election, to a award system. We've been an at-large. And at-large, you have 6 councillors that are for the whole town.
Right.
And what we felt is we needed to move to awards to allow for that a little bit more better engagement within each council, because now they specifically have a certain area they can deal with, and residents know who they have to go to or who they need to go to bring up those questions, to be engaged with them, right? Instead of just trying to blast out an email to everybody and hope, one of them or maybe 2 of them answer. And so we've changed that structure to help with that part of engagement, so we can hear from the community directly on a regular basis. So some of those things you have to do, you have to meet one-on-one, but that's, as I said, it depends on the individual community. Some don't do that, some do. And I know that, like, even if you look at a provincial level, the premier is, I think, a little bit, and I've met him a whole bunch of times and I have conversations with him. I'd say he falls into a little bit of a category, similar style of kind of the approach I take, is where you want to meet with people. I think he gives out his phone number to everybody. And so he has that type of approach, where some won't take that approach. I mean, we've seen previous premiers, I think, that it's been tough to get a hold of them or even have a conversation as a mayor.
Right.
But this one, you can, Premier Ford will just give out his number and you're able to discuss them. So I think it depends on 2 things: the community, the size, or 3 things, and the individual themselves, their approach to how they feel they need to engage with the community or the province.
Thank you. There's a second part of the question that Deborah sent in, and I'll kind of couch it. Knowledge mobilization from our office standpoint, it's all about making research relevant to society. A lot of that involves translating research into forms and products that are a little more accessible. Deborah's question: when thinking about knowledge mobilization, what forms are most well received by local government?
What forms? Well, see, I'm trying to think of how it impacts and how we work together with the town of Aurora at a local level. What forms are well received?
So I guess a little further to the assumption is that not everybody, I kind of joke around that, well, half joking, not everybody wants to read a 35-page journal article that has relevant and suggested tips. So whether it's, a traditional policy brief, or, now there's a change around the visualization of data and information. Does it become quite kind of, sounds like there could be some variance to it as well.
So I mean, from that aspect, the forms that are well received are the ones that, especially at the local level, I've always maintained in anything that we do, is that you want to, and it's not, and Allison so knows this, and I say it to her all the time, is you have to bring the level of it down a little bit to allow for, I always say the regular person, I always consider myself a regular person, to be able to go through it and kind of get it, not feel like they're reading it and not getting a grasp of what's being in that document. And I guess that the ones that I think that I've witnessed through my time on being on council and hearing feedback from other councillors as well, and even from some staff, is that the ones that come across very well to everyone is that they have like an executive summary on it that just kind of has like every, the major points in there for everyone to have an understanding of what's going on. And you can go in depth into the rest of the policy and everything. But I think when they're a little bit, the level of the writing, and I know that's difficult when you're talking with researchers or, PhDs or anyone else doing research, that obviously I'm not saying that you should dumb it down, but in essence, that's that's the ones that you find that are more well received, are the ones that they have people that might not have a full understanding or grasp what's being written, that they can at least understand it to a certain extent. So that is usually what you find at the local level. There's a difference between the reports, and I'll give you an example. The reports at the region compared to the reports at the local level from our staff
Okay.
council are totally different. They're like night and day. So at the regional level, they're a little bit higher level. At the local level, they're a little bit, down here. And even when you look at the province and how anything that comes out from the provincial government, their reports and stuff like that, that's even at a higher level compared to the region. So each level you go up, there is just a different level of communication, different level of policy, different level of report. But at the local level, they always say it needs to be, you need to think in your mind that everyone in the community needs to be able to read it and understand it.
I love that. I mean,
not just us
yeah,
sitting at the table.
yeah. I don't know about all the participants, but I'm a huge proponent of clear language writing and design, where it doesn't take away from the complexity of the work or even the message, but it just simply makes it more approachable for a lot of people. So, I have a few questions, and I invite people to kind of chime in the chat if they have something. Tom, you spoke earlier about engagement with the province, and I suspect since the middle of March, there has been a heightened level of coordination between the town and the municipalities in York Region. I also suspect that the general feeling with Canadians is there's a real sense of comfort in the sense that there's been political coordination around the response to the pandemic. How has that coordination effort gone from your standpoint? How would you categorize it? How important has it been to you and in the town of Aurora?
So first and foremost, it's been extremely important. The coordination has been incredible. I've actually publicly stated that I think that, and I think most mayors, even the premier and even the prime minister, how all three levels of government have been working together through this. And it doesn't matter whether you're conservative, liberal, NDP, Green, everyone's been working together, and it's been quite amazing to see that. The collective effort put forward to say that we need to work together on all of this, and we need to forget about fighting, bickering, debating, our differences, and we all understand that this is a very serious issue, and that we all need to be able to get through this. And the only way we're going to get through it is by working together. So that it's I have to say that I've been in many more times contact with our deputy premier, who's our MPP for Aurora, so Minister Elliott. I've been much more contact with her than I have during regular times. On a weekly basis, we'll just, even just text each other at least and say, so how are, is everything okay? At least to a minimum. We have that quick conversation. And even with the premier, and I know that he's very accessible, but, send him a quick text or give him a call. He'll call us. The other ministers set up a lot of meetings with the mayors, and we have conversations over new policies that we might be looking at that are coming through because of the pandemic. As I mentioned at the beginning, looking at having virtual meetings. We've never been allowed to have virtual meetings before this pandemic. It was something that was not allowed under the Municipal Act. And the province realized quickly that if we're going to, in a state of emergency where we can't be within proximity of each other, that 6 feet, that 2 meters that we all talk about, well, then how can a council of, and when you look at Toronto, the size of 40, I forgot the number that they are now because Doug Ford, Premier, cut them down. So I think are they at 40 or are they 20 something? I really don't know the number of how many, but to have a council of that size and try to distance them is very difficult. And so they realized the best way to move forward was to have remote meetings. And so they made that policy change. And they were able to do it quickly because they are in a state of emergency, and the state of emergency under the act allows for us to have certain powers where we don't need to bring it to, in our instance, bring it to the council table and have a full-on debate and then have a vote. It's, under the state of emergency, I have certain powers afforded to me as the mayor that I'm allowed to make decisions on the spot instead of bringing it to council. And so all of those things have allowed us to, all work together. So when the premier calls and says, you know what, we need you guys at the municipal level to do this, this, and this, I can make that decision, and I don't need to go back to council and say, well, I'll get back to you in about a week's time, because we need to call a council meeting, and you need to have 2 days under the act to inform the public that you're having a council meeting. And so I do know that some people will question and say that there's a bit of a power grab to try to, to not go through the proper democratic ways of creating policy or making decisions. But at the same time, everything is transparent, and that's what we make sure of, is that the transparency is there. We let everyone know. For my instance, I can make those decisions, but before I make those decisions, I reach out to every single one of my councillors and have a discussion with them quickly, let them know what is happening, what's occurring, the decision that I'm looking at making, and I make sure that they're comfortable with it before I move forward. That takes a little bit less time than having to formally have a council meeting, but they appreciate the fact that I do reach out to them, even though technically you don't need to, but I think that it's important to have that transparency aspect of it in there and make sure that you are transparent to everybody. And that's another thing that all levels of government are doing, is that they're doing that and working with each other. We're all making sure that everyone knows what's happening at every level. And so communication has been great. The level of the fact that everyone knows that if we're in silos and we're doing things individually, we're not going to be able to get through this. And everyone has been doing anything that they can to make sure that we're all working together. So I got to say, it's been great with all 3 levels of government.
Fabulous. Pardon me. Thank you very much. Got a few questions in, so this will be enough about me, and I'll get to our participant questions. Firstly, a shout out of thanks from one of the participants. I've got a colleague that's also working in knowledge mobilization, focusing on a large-scale national project. She's wondering if you had any tips for an organization working on a government relations strategy.
Any tips? Reach out. It depends on which level. So, I mean, if you were dealing with us, I would say reach out, especially speak to the elected officials that have control of whichever area that you're looking at dealing with. So let's say on the provincial side, if you want to deal with the Minister of Infrastructure, speak to the Minister of Infrastructure. Don't give up. I know a lot of people say it seems a bit pushy, but don't settle just for dealing with staff. Staff are great, but you also want to talk to the person in charge. And I know that's my style. I don't know if it would work all the time, but that's my advice to you, would be to speak to the person at the top, speak to the elected officials, let them know, reach out to them, have conversations with them, and keep pushing with them, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to make the decision. They're the ones that have the final say. And so they need to have a full understanding. And the only way they're going to have a full understanding is if they're speaking directly with you as well. And so my advice would be to reach out to them directly.
Thank you very much. I have 2 more. I have a general question, and then I'll get to a very specific question, Tom. And I don't know all the details of its specificity. I mean, you could certainly answer it, but based on your engagement, it could possibly even be taken offline, but I won't presume. Outside of a global pandemic, in your experience, how likely are policy changes and/or recommendations to be implemented at a local or provincial level?
Well, outside of a global pandemic, it's actually a pretty simple structure, especially from the local level. If if someone was to bring it to our attention, so if it depends on who's bringing it forward, but it ultimately would have to be brought forward by a councillor or by the mayor, by myself, to the council table, and that would be through a motion, a notice of motion. We need to put in a notice of motion. So, structure would be if we wanted to make a policy change or new legislation within our municipal, our municipal boundaries, we would put forward a notice of motion. That notice of motion sits on our agenda for the public to view for 2 weeks. We go through our cycle. We have a committee of the whole, general committee, and then we move to our council meetings. Council meetings is where we ratify any decisions that we discussed during our committee meetings. But council is the only time that we would hear motions. And so that motion would be heard at council after it's been sitting on the agenda for the 2 weeks. So the public would have time to digest it. Then if there are any concerns from the public, they would come out to that council meeting and delegate and speak on that issue and let us know whether they're pro, con, or, whatever their thoughts are about what the motion is that we're going to discuss. Council will then deliberate and debate the motion, and then we would put it to a vote. And once we put it to a vote at council, that's it. It's either a yes or no, and we either move forward with that policy change or not. It's that simple at a local level. I know at the provincial level, it's slightly different, and same with the federal level, where you put forward a bill and you have first reading, second reading, third reading. But at the local level, it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And then the only difference with the pandemic is that we can avoid going to the council meeting, putting forward a notice of motion, because, as I said, as the mayor, you have certain powers under a state of emergency just to make decisions on behalf of the community. And so, in certain instances, but even though I have that power, it has to be in regards to the pandemic. I can't just, if we're looking at instituting a new policy and it has nothing to do with the pandemic, I cannot override council and just make that decision. It would still have to go to council. So there are still some limitations to that power in its state of emergency. But to answer that one, it's pretty straightforward. Just notice of motion, council, decision, and it would be, policy would be in place.
Thank you very much.
I hope that answers the
question. From my standpoint, I invite Deborah to chime in with a follow-up or to clarify. I'll get to a final question I have in the queue. It is from a Master's of Environmental Studies student here at York. It's probably a little more specific. How much money do you estimate Aurora loses yearly from the changes of Bill 108 made to Section 37 and 42 funds received under the Planning Act? In Toronto, for example, the impact could be about $924 million. Has there been any progress reversing this new policy?
All right. Well, you can have me here for another 2 hours if you want me to discuss Bill 108. So, I mean, if anyone knows any background of myself, was absolutely against Bill 108. I fought hard last term to remove the OMB, the Ontario Municipal Board. We did fight and get those changes at a provincial level, and they brought in LPAT. And it wasn't just a name change, but they did make some changes that did bring more authority back to the municipal side. It was unfortunate that Bill 108 came in when the new government came in and they made the changes, and it's put a strain as far as decision making on the planning side at the local level. A lot of us feel that what we do, what we say, how we want our communities to grow, we don't have the ultimate authority, and it's very frustrating because we sit there and it seems like we're making decisions, and our residents come in and they say, you need to say no to this, when realistically we know that if we say no to this, we know exactly what's going to happen is it's going to get appealed, it's going to go to the board, and the board is going to look at it from a provincial policy standpoint, not from a local policy standpoint, and not look at our official plan. and they're going to make the decision on that basis. And usually 9 times out of 10, they overturn our decision. And so all we've done is really spent money and lost money in essence from our taxpayers. But as far as from Section 37 and the bonusing and the changes to the development charges and how much money the town's losing, our planning department is still working through a lot of that, because they were just finishing up with some of that. And I know Toronto's a little bit more ahead as far as having their staff develop a report and documenting how much money and projecting how much money they'll be losing through all the changes. Our staff is just finishing that up, so I don't have exact numbers. Will we be in a deficit? Will we lose money from this? That won't come. Absolutely. Um, I know that while they were working on it, the pandemic hit, and so everything else kind of got stalled at this point. But we will be getting that report. I will be getting those numbers. But we need to change Bill 108. The one thing I can say about Bill 108 too is that the first time I met the Premier, and I like telling the story because it's actually an interesting it's a funny story, but I argued on social media, in the papers, anyone that would hear me out, I said that about Bill 108 and the problems and the issues with it. And after that, I was trying to get some meetings with either some ministers or even the Premier himself, and no one was responding. I couldn't get any meetings. And then I went to an event and I saw the Premier there. And so I just did a beeline straight to the Premier, and I went right up to him and I said, "Hey, Mr. Premier, how you doing?" I said, "It's Tom Mrakas, Mayor of Town of Aurora." And he said, "I know who you are." I said, "Well," I said, "I got to tell you," I said, "Bill 108 sucks." I said, it's garbage. I said, you're ruining planning within our communities." I said, "I don't like it." I said, we need to discuss how we can change that." I said, there are a few things that I do like that you guys are doing. I said, "But I would love the opportunity to sit down with you and have lunch and discuss how we can work together on a few of these things, and also have a longer discussion about Bill 108. And he said, "Absolutely." And since then, we've had lunch. And so I think he appreciated the fact that I just told him straight up how I felt, and I was honest with them. So the longer goal is to obviously work with the provincial government to try to revert some of those changes that they did make, and see that they made some mistakes in bringing in Bill 108, and how it's going to hurt municipalities as we continue to grow. It is problematic. Obviously we are from a financial standpoint, it's gonna hamper us, but at the same time, even just from a plain planning policy side of it, we develop our official plans, we develop our zoning and stuff, everything like that to create a vision for our communities. And not every community is the same. Vaughan's not the same as Aurora, and Markham's not the same as Aurora, Aurora's not the same as Toronto. And a 30-story building is great in Toronto, maybe in Markham, in Vaughan, in Richmond Hill, maybe, but it's not great in the town of Aurora. And the problem with the way that Bill 108 is structured from a planning policy side is that we lose our authority to be able to have that say in how our community grows. And so the fight of me turning around, even as the mayor, and an application comes in and says that they want a 10-story building, and I turn and say, "No, you can't have a 10-story building. Our OP states that you can only have 5 plus 1. Even though that's what our OP states, it's a struggle, and they'll push it, they'll fight it, they'll appeal it. And once they appeal it, it goes to LPAT. LPAT will 9 times out of 10, as I said, will approve that higher density because it meets the provincial policy. And this is where I think that there needs to be a change from the policy side, that more of that authority needs to fall back to the local municipalities. Fully understand and appreciate the fact that we need to grow, that we need to evolve, but at the same time, it needs to be appropriate growth for each individual community. And that's why Bill 108 needs to change. And I'm going to continue to push hard, continue to sit down and have those conversations with the Premier. And hopefully, because I know that the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Mr. Clark, when we saw him at AMO, which is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, at the conference, they have a bull pit, and this was the year before the pandemic hit. And he stated, judge me in a year. And so I feel that they're at least willing to look after some time and see how Bill 108 has impacted communities. And hopefully they'll be willing to make those changes that will allow us to bring back some of that authority, but also allow us to not lose as much money through development charges through Section 30, the changes they made to Section 37 as well. So I'm optimistic that they're open to listening, opening to look at making changes, and I think it's going to take all of us, as all municipalities, to get together, band together, and have those conversations with the province, and hopefully they'll make those necessary policy changes and give that authority back to the municipalities.
Thank you very much, Tom. Great question, Martin. And it's almost like we got a little inside world of the way in which you work. It was a really clear and comprehensive response, and just the way in which you kind of channel that passion. It also kind of weaves in your theme too around engagement, because your example around how you just basically just sought out the premier, you were clear around your concerns and let him know what you were looking for. I have, well, it's final now. I probably have a ton more questions. Since mid-March, I'm sure it has not been business as usual for the town. What has been the most challenging component around governing in the state of the pandemic? But what is the second component is, what are you most proud of?
Well, I'll go with the most proud first part. What I'm most proud of is the fact that we've, as a council and as a community, have banded together, and we've, for the most part, I mean, we all say this, and I know that we hear other mayors as well talk about this, is that in their communities, for the most part, everyone has said, listen, we need to do this. We need to, whether it's any rules that we're implementing, any new guidelines, everyone says, well, you know what, we need to abide by these. We need to move forward with what our government is telling us, and so we can get through this. And I'm very proud of the community here in the town of Aurora for everything that they've done, from following park closures and not looking to kind of have like private gatherings and stuff. That they've, for the most part, everyone has done an extremely well job in adhering to those guidelines. And so I've been proud of everyone and all the work that they've done. For my counselors as well, everyone's looking to chip in, organizations giving money to help out those that are most vulnerable in our community. People just stepping up and just giving back. It's those, I think those are the types of things that you see happening in your community, and it just overwhelms you with pride that those that are fortunate are willing to help out and want to help out those that are less fortunate, especially during this time. It's it's just something to is that me?
No. I'm gonna mute everybody.
All right.
Sounds like a good idea if I do that.
Yeah, don't know where
that is. That's not the worst ringtone I've ever heard. I'll tell you that, though.
No, it's on my phone. I can tell you that. If it was my phone, just to let everyone know, it probably would have been Metallica. So just don't. But yeah, that's what I think I've been most proud of during this time. And sorry, and Johnny, what was the other part of the first part?
So it's, what are you most proud of, but what's been the most challenging?
Oh, most challenging, and I guess you know what, I think a lot of people have probably seen this. You see it in the news as well. I think the challenging part of going through this pandemic is, I guess, is dealing with I guess some that question, and there's nothing wrong with obviously questioning things, but that don't believe the pandemic is actually happening, that don't believe the science, and don't believe what our medical experts are saying, and think there's ulterior motives. And I think that's been kind of a difficult thing to deal with. We're trying to get through that. I always maintain that, when you have medical experts, when the experts are telling you something and it's scientific, you follow that advice. I mean, who am I to question what the science is saying? Obviously, I'm still going to make my decision. That's not going to be my ultimate fallback, is to fall on that. But you do need to hear that. And I think the challenging part has been letting everyone know that this is for the good of everyone. This is good for the whole community. It's we need to do this, and it's been challenging, but like I said, I think for the most part everyone's done an excellent job. But yeah, that's been a bit of a challenge.
I can appreciate that. I've put out a note to everybody if there are any final questions. I think the idea of a few extra minutes in people's day is never a problem, which also aligns with the adage. I've never heard anybody say, hey, I get too many emails. So an extra 10 or 15 minutes is fine. I will give folks in case they have something to ask, and I popped in here. Oh, here we go. I've got another question in the Q&A. Tom, after the virus, a lot of people are looking for big green infrastructure investments to build back the economy and lower carbon emissions. What are you doing to prepare for that?
Absolutely. So I think, and I think everyone believes that you need to continue with infrastructure projects, and especially green. I know that the town of Aurora, we declared a climate emergency. We did our CEP. We're looking at initiatives where we're going to be doing solar panels within all our community centers. Hopefully, we're looking at greening our fleet. Those are just some of the things as far from a green perspective, but from an infrastructure perspective, we have one of the biggest projects this town will ever see as we move out of this pandemic, and that's our Library Square. It's our downtown core, and we're looking at redeveloping it into a square, a gathering place, and we're hoping that the gathering rules change, but we're 2 years away from it, actually being completed. So, but part of that is we're implementing green features within that. There's going to be green roof. Even the walkway is going to have greenery on top of it as well. There's going to be a rain a barrel system. It's not necessarily a barrel, but a recycling system where the water's going to come in, it's going to get filtered through, and it's going to come back out, and it's going to be used within the buildings in there. There's going to be a new 20,000 square foot building, but that building is going to have the green roof, as I mentioned, and this is a $56 million project in the town of Aurora. So not only from an infrastructure perspective, is this something that we're going to move forward with, because obviously we believe it's important to move forward with those infrastructure projects, because if you stall infrastructure projects coming out of this pandemic, then you're really going to hurt the economy even more. And so, but at the same time, we do need to have an understanding that from an environmental perspective, things need to be put in place. And I think that in the town of Aurora, we are doing some of those, we are putting some of those measures in place, because it is important. And if anyone knows the town of Aurora, I'm not sure if anyone lives in the town of Aurora that's on this call, but if you do know, we're different than most municipalities. We're very big on maintaining our open spaces, our green spaces, looking at how we can protect the environment. We are situated on the Oak Ridges Moraine, and it's probably one of the most important things for us as we grow. And any project that we do is we always look at how does that impact our environment, even from a flooding perspective, because we all know that we're seeing more and more floods, and we need to start putting funds aside, which is what we're doing. We are putting funds in a reserve to ensure that we can look at how we can better protect our community from those floods that are possibly be coming. We have some floods that are happening right now more and more often, and so we need to make those changes from an infrastructure standpoint to make sure that that's implemented as well. But we are working on a lot of things through that Library Square project that will make sure that that project is very environmentally friendly.
Thank you, Tom. And I've got a final question before we close things off. How is the municipality of Aurora currently reaching out to constituents during the current pandemic?
A lot through social media. I'm very big on social media, so I put everything on either on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the town does as well. We have separate channels, but we collaborate on the messaging. Obviously, it's the same messaging. It's just different areas. Some people follow me, some people follow the town, but we get it out that way. We also do mail outs and obviously email as well. It's unfortunate. I used to go door to door, even during regular times, not just during election. It's part of my whole engagement strategies to go out and meet with everyone. And unfortunately, we can't do that at this time. And that's how we evolved into the coffees, the virtual coffees. That's another type of way to engage and meet with the residents that we put forward. Moving forward, we might also look at doing some virtual town halls as well to on specific topics that that residents might be passionate about, and have them come out and speak with myself and with some staff members and be able to have those conversations. So we are looking into that one as well, bringing that one on board. But the newest one we did is the virtual coffees with the mayor, and hopefully that will translate also into maybe some virtual coffees with councillors as well, so we can have a more wider reach.
Fabulous, thank you. I'm going to close things off now. I mean, there's more I could ask, but this isn't all about me. Tom, we can't thank you enough for making the time to connect with us and to provide insight around your work and the excellent work that's happening within Aurora, insights around local decision making, which to me is all about engagement and clear communications. It's refreshing to see, and it's really encouraging from somebody who works within a research office that there's folks like yourself that are really open and amenable to connecting with community leaders and research. We wish you continued success with the great work you're doing in Aurora, and really thank you for your time today. Also, for the participants, there are no shortage of options out there. There are a lot of webinars, a lot of ways to stay connected. You chose to hang out with us for an hour. Whether it is the afternoon, we had some folks sign up from overseas and other parts of the country. So whether it is good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, stay safe, be well, and thank you all. Tom, thank you so much. Take good care.
Thank you, and thank you everyone, and everyone stay safe, and anytime reach out to me anytime. Appreciate it.